Well, hey, everybody, thanks for joining today. This should be an exciting session and one that is great for you, especially if you're planning how to make your company better at using feature flags and experimentation, kind of where you rank on that. We're going to talk about maturity. I'll get into all that in just a minute. But first, I want to do a little bit of introductions. If you're wondering why you're hearing me and my mouth is not moving, it's because we have two speakers today. I'm kind of in the ether. Most of the presentation is going to be done by Alex, but let me introduce myself and then I'll let Alex give a go. So my name is Aaron Newcomb. I work for Harness and I help with our feature management and experimentation product. And, I've been doing this for a long time. I don't know. I've been in the industry longer than I would want to tell you because then you would know how old I am. But it's been a long time and I'm super excited to be at Harness talking about this today. So Alex, give a little bit about your background because I think that's more pertinent to what we're going to be talking about today.
Sure, thank you, Aaron. Well, first of all, thank you for joining us today. So yeah, my name is Alexander Bock. I'm based out of London, and I'm one of Harness's subject matter experts of feature management and experimentation. I've been a practitioner for the last 10 years, running large-scale experimentation and feature management practices at companies like the Zone, which is one of the largest sports steering companies. And before joining Harness, I was the head of experimentation at JP Morgan, specifically for Chase UK and West Germany. So really excited to tell you all about feature management experimentation and especially how to assess your maturity today.
Great, great. Yeah, so as you can tell, Alex is perfect for this kind of discussion because he's actually been out in the field, having these types of problems, really wondering how can I make my use of these types of products better. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We have a lot of customers who use these products. Some of them are more successful than others. And so we look at this and we think, okay, well, what makes the most successful customer? What separates those customers that we have that are using these tools effectively from the ones that maybe are still in the beginning stages? So we're going to be talking about those kind of maturity model or maturity steps, if you will. And throughout this whole discussion, we're also going to be gauging where you're at in the process as well. So we'll be doing a little bit of a game today where we ask you where you're at in the process as we go through the different steps. And then we'll explain what that step is. So maybe you get a better understanding of it. And then we'll be retesting your knowledge and seeing if maybe you place yourself a little bit differently on the scale once we explain what that particular maturity step means. This is a great webinar to share with your colleagues, with your management, anyone who wants to get better or improve the way their business uses feature flags and experimentations, improve their ROI, not just on our product, but really any product. This applies broadly across the whole industry. So please take this back and share it with your colleagues and also ask questions. We'll be asking for questions. Go ahead and put them in the Q&A as we go through. And as you bring them in, as we get through kind of each section, we'll stop and ask any or answer any questions that you might have. So please do that as well. Okay, with all that set up out of the way, I'm going to turn it over to you, Alex, and take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Aaron. That was a lovely description of what we're going to do today. All right, so what are we going to do first? I think with the first couple of minutes, we're going to go through just general some of the key concepts of feature management and experimentation and really how we see it. And then we're going into effectively the maturity assessment in itself. Cool. So let's just have a quick overview of where you can actually deploy feature flagging and by de facto also experimentation, right? Because there is many, many different use cases where your organization might benefit from it. And some of these use cases might not be straightforward. So effectively, what you see here on this slide here is that you have these main areas of where it can help you, right? You can run feature flags and experiments to really accelerate and de-risk your customer acquisition strategies, like running different landing page strategies, hooking it up to digital marketing campaigns as well. You can hook it up with and trying to improve your customer satisfaction and your revenue goals for the entire organization by running all kinds of sort of like big feature management and experimentation practice on your websites, on your applications, where a lot of our customers are actually using our tool at the moment. You can do a lot of like offering and pricing testing, understanding what is the sweet spot between bundling up different products you have, understanding what kind of pricing strategy works, what it doesn't work. Lots of our customers are also using it on kiosks and ATMs. And when I talk about kiosk, it might be like, airlines trying to run different experiments or different flavors of the feature flags for like different markets and different airports. There's also lots of firms who run experiments on their TV devices, like for example on PlayStation, smart TVs, or other like Internet of things like smart fridges or smart watches to really tailor and build up a very resilient feature flagging release profile for these like more niche devices. Coming to like customer retention, right? There's all kinds of different use cases that you can use. Like the one obviously is like how to like trying to like help your customer ops to make better sense of what was the actual customer experience, right? Because as you build a feature management practice, you also will increase the amount of different feature variations that you have, right? So if you now then if a customer ops person and then potentially tries to replicate what experience a user has or has seen. It's a great way of using what flavor of an app the user actually got. So the customer ops person can actually then properly see where the downfalls were, where some of the issues lie when trying to solve for like a particular issue within the customer servicing journey. Same goes, you can integrate it like feature flagging and experimentation with your CRM systems to really optimize that. When should you send that push notification to a person, at what point, what type of content, how frequently, and so on, to really understand what works best to nudge your customers to do a certain desired outcome. You can run and test, but put your loyalty programs behind an experimentation behind feature flags. One of my absolute favorites is also like that you can fully integrate it with your CSM system. So basically your content management system to ensure that when you're running different feature flags, but maybe in like new features and old features, that you ensure that you have like a consistent user experience for all the different types of content that you want to display, that you have like really a consistent content strategy for all the different flavors of feature flags and experiments that you're running at scale within the organization. Coming now to like kind of like the last point here, which is all about operations and reducing costs. Obviously, that's a big thing. Big organizations, big firms, and even small firms would massively benefit of having a lean operation center. And the only way to really do this is to understand what can be retired, what can be migrated, how can we be more efficient the way we're doing things. So I want to like really focus on like the last three things here for a second: tech debt removal, cloud migration, and trunk-based development, right? One of the main use cases we see our customers really use feature flagging at Swales is really like because we're working with a lot of like legacy organizations who like maybe build a lot of products over the last 10, 20 years there in the software delivery cycle. And sometimes they're like, we don't know, like if we would turn off a service, what kind of downstream impact it has, because it might be too scary to turn something off, right? So by putting it behind a proper feature flag, measuring the impact, see what the downstream impact is, it really helps them in the end to remove all these like this unknown tech debt and the implications of that to really accelerate and free up resources, because suddenly you don't have to maintain those items anymore. Another big use case is where we see all the time is for cloud migrations. Like I don't know, you want to go from one cloud provider to another cloud provider, or you want to go from a monolithic tech stack to a cloud tech stack. By splitting up your code base, putting things behind feature flags, and really putting it into like different elements. So then basically says this feature now should run in AWS. This feature should point to like an Azure endpoint. It really helps with like de-risking and doing this cloud migration in a really safe and consistent way. And the last point really is all about trunk-based development. It's basically because you have a feature flag, because you have different variations, because you can run them in a different environments, it really starts you to allow to like develop things in parallel and in a much more better way. And it's almost like a GitHub, GitOps extension if you already use these methodologies, but now actually within the different environments, within live production environments as well, to really accelerating and de-risk and potentially solve merging conflicts very early on. So this is really just a brief overview of like what kind of like feature flagging and experimentation and practice can really do if you have a good and reliable setup, and where it can help your organization. But now let's a little bit about more of the technical details first, so we are all speaking the same language and like understanding what do I mean with a feature flag, right? So here, as an example, I show you like say a microservice setup. The green box, by the way, stands for continuous delivery, one of the modules that we have harnessed to really accelerate the deployment of a service. And everything in purple is feature flagging and experimentation. So the FME module, right? So say you have deployed a big microservice to 100%, everything went smoothly, and now you want to think about how you can control the individual elements of the service to your customers, right? So say maybe feature one, feature two, feature three are live from the get-go because that was the configurations and how you decided to deploy it in the first place. Now, for example, you have this feature number three. And during this release process, right, where you maybe want to go from 10% to 25%, you suddenly, when you launch it, when you release it to 40, 75%, because that's what we can do through a system called canary releases, you maybe find a degradation in performance, like for example, latency, or in, for example, in user metrics. So it automatically flags it and then says, hey, wait a minute, I shouldn't scale this up further because there's an issue, right? So feature management experimentation as a module can help you then automatically de-risk these things because you can automatically controls, guardrails in place to really ensure that when you launch something, it is when you release something, it is done in a reliable and structured way. What it can also do is, right, if we take, for example, feature 1.2, this here that's currently toggled as off, it allows you to also target specific subgroup groups and users with a specific experience that you have in mind, right? So in this example, maybe our goal is to release it to 50% of the users, right? So we don't want to maybe use a canary release, but maybe we just want to like turn the toggle on and says releases to 50% of the users. Through the module, you can do that, right? So this is the kind of like the two main concepts I want to like for you to keep in mind today is that A, you can have full control about what gets turned on and off within a service as a whole, and you basically structure and make your service into like more sub elements itself, which gives you this really highly granular control of who should get what and when they should get it, and that you can then also use this almost as a quasi personalization thing where you want to say, I want to only release these things to my QA team, my alpha users, or 50% of my customer base to really see what does it do and where does it do, right? Which then basically enables you then to run experiments on top of that, right? So how do we normally see a company mature through this entire cycle, right? And that's basically for like lots of conversations that we had with prospects and some of our clients, and most of them start somewhere within the organization identify the need of having a basic on-off toggle, you know, as a pure risk mitigation element. Like I want to have the ability as a developer to just turn this feature off and on so I can ensure that when something goes wrong, I have some sort of control. When they start doing this thing, they then start to think about, okay, if I want to now have my feature, how can I be a bit more have more control about when I release things and how slowly can I ramp up traffic to that particular feature flag, right? Because as you scale up your business, as you scale up your features, your load might increase, and maybe you didn't have done enough road testing potentially yet. So you might want to just see at what point does my feature actually might break, right? Or you want to play it super safe and says, I know that my feature is being built to handle 1 million requests, but I just want to make sure that it doesn't do from the get-go. So how about I start with 10% of my customer base, 20%, 30%, 40% until it breaks, or hopefully it doesn't break, right? Then normally what happens is once an organization has adopted the practice of on-off toggling, progressive rollouts, they start then to think about, okay, now I have maybe 100 or 200 or 300 feature flags in production to really understand how can I manage those? How should I manage my life cycle? When should I deploy them? When I should get rid of them? How can I make this process as easy as possible and not lose track of all the things that I have in my deployments? in my releases to ensure that nothing goes wrong, right? So it's all about then how do you manage this at scale? So they start thinking about putting like quality gates in, RBAC controls, governance, audit trails to really making sure that these things don't break. And then someone, a product manager or a data science team or UX system sees this as like, oh, great. Now we have the ability, to like turn things off, have progressive rollout. We have some sort of like measurement or like management at scale. Can I now like kind of like test certain things around this and see if I can run an experiment on these different types of features, maybe just simple on-off tests to see if my idea actually works, if the stuff that we want to build actually makes sense to build in the first place. And that then normally gives birth to like proper experimentation teams and proper experimentation programs at scale within organizations, where then it suddenly not just becomes about de-risking the release of a software, but also measuring the long-term impact on items like UX journeys, customer experiences, revenue. And it truly turns into like a really smooth engine on testing things at scales and see what works and doesn't work so that you in the long run don't really introduce tech debt to your organization, right? Because if you don't measure what you release, you don't know if it actually works or not. And that's just basically justification of why we're trying to do a proper experiment, right? And what does experimentation actually mean here? Because like sometimes this term is thrown out and it means different things for many different things for different people. But when we talk about here experimentation at Harness, we effectively mean a particular thing. We mean a classical A/B test or ABN test, a multivariate test, where you have some users and say 50% of that users go to an existing journey and 50% of these users go to a new journey. Then you gather some data around this, and then you do a statistical analysis on every metric, on every feature, and every rollout that is associated with that particular experiment. And that basically then gives you a full idea of like what has happened and how it has happened. And here in Harness, we always try to argue that we think there is like three different types of an experiment or that organizations should think about to really understand where they should go from a maturity point of view. So the first type of experiments that I will always describe is the strategic types. You know, and effectively that means new ways of generating revenue. So basically, you're trying to figure out new things. You're trying to build up a completely new feature, something that has never been done before in your organization to really understand, does it work? Will it work? Is there even appetite for it? Right? But it's a strong deviation from like our existing ways of doing things to really understand, will it help propel the business in the right direction? Then there are tactical experiments. And tactical experiments are basically all about not to reinvent the wheel, like with strategic kind of tests. It's all about local optimizations and existing user flows and existing journeys and existing products that you have to find that perfect sweet spot in your existing journeys, right? Because you kind of already done a lot of work. Maybe you don't have the headcount or the resources, the engineering resources to like build up these new strategic pieces, but you still want to optimize the stuff that you have in your existing flows. So therefore, you should think about all these tactical experiments. And then the last thing, which is absolutely my favorite, is called validations. And validations is a bit of a weird term. What I mean here with validations is like at one point in your product journey, you've built features. Maybe you haven't measured them the right way in a good way beforehand. But now if you would have the ability to run this as a proper experiment, what happens if you remove a feature from users? What if you like turn off a user flow? What if you turn off the ability to call customers, for example, to see what it would the impact on customer support queries? Because maybe you want to push them towards a chatbot instead of like calling you, because obviously calling you is a very expensive thing to do from a customer support point of view, right? So it's a great way of validating previous assumptions that we made about certain user flows, certain product decisions, certain feature or architectural decision within the organization to really see, does it make sense to still have it or not? And if it doesn't, get rid of it, and you can use the resources that you use to maintain this for more strategic or more tactical tests. And one thing I want to throw out into the room right now is this little thingy at the bottom. So in my 10 years of running large-scale experimentation programs, this is about the outcome profile of tests that you can expect, right? That means when you say you run 1,000 tests, 200 of them will probably have a positive outcome. 60% of those, or 600, probably won't do nothing in terms of the metrics that you're trying to optimize for, e.g., maybe revenue or a certain click-through metrics. And 20% will actually harm your customers. Obviously, this outcome profile like changes slightly depending on the industry you're in, the maturity of your organization, and so on. But if you start to really think about this, internalize it, that if you don't measure your releases in a good and reliable way, it could be well up to 80% of all the stuff that you're doing either has no impact or a negative impact for your customers. So think about you're just introducing tech debt in the long run and slowly reducing your velocity to actually ship new features in a good and reliable way, right? So in my opinion, it's of utmost importance to get to that point to really start measuring everything and start experimenting with all the releases that you have to ensure that you're not just building things that no one's ending using and doesn't really drive the business outcomes. Cool. Let me just give you one quick example of like how that could look in practice, and then we're actually going to the maturity assessment itself. All right. So as I said before joining Harness, I was working for Chase UK, part of the JP Morgan Group, and there was the head of experimentation. At Chase UK, effectively, we had bunch of different things and a bunch of different items, right? So here and on the screen, you see the App Store, the Chase UK, and so on. Within the App Store, you see these different app versions, right? 2.59, 2.58, 2.80, right? And those are normally when we talk about deployments, big deployments of like all kinds of new features that we have released. So in the synopsis, is really all about what features we release. So if you think about with a single deployment, for example, Chase UK could have anywhere between like 180 or more feature flags to really say, to control these individual elements of that deployment, to release this to individual new segments of users, subgroups, beta customers, alpha customers, and so on, to really figure out what works, throttle these traffic, and giving like access to entire new features, right? So for example, in this version history, it says, say hello to Discovery, your one-stop shop to browse all our latest offer, which was an entire new feature behind a feature flag to promote new product offerings that we had within our banking application. And now if you bring this concept in further, you can then run experiments on these 100 feature flags to really then measure what has worked and how has it done and performed, not just from a release monitoring perspective, but also then from a long-term impact perspective. So we're talking, we had 2 weeks, 3 weeks, up to effectively 3 months to see how it has performed and is it worth having in our application. At this point, I normally get the questions like, yeah, but why would I care about deployments for an app? Because I might have like limitations of like how often I can publish to the App Store. As also you probably know, with the App Store, it's just basically just once a week, right? But for a modern application, a modern mobile application, it is a sum of multiple microservices in the ideal world that is driving these applications in the backend, right? So even you do just maybe just deploy the entire like app client stack to the App Store just once a week, you can still deploy and change different elements for your microservice architecture, which requires own CD pipelines, CD frameworks, and everything. And all these pipelines and microservices can then be basically put behind a feature flag to then say, okay, to then understand and de-risk what comes from that microservice and understand and change these individual components in a good and reliable way. And this is really why, kind of like a lot of our customers, use CD and FME really together to really understand, like to really de-risk not just the deployments, but also the individual releases of the features in itself. Cool.
Hey, Alex, before we get to the next slide, there was one quick question that came in
Yeah,
around AI, and I noticed you had that down there at the bottom of
I did. Yeah.
yeah. So just one quick question around that, since we live in an AI bubble, how could I use feature flags and experimentation to validate or, with the code that's being automatically generated or with a chatbot that is, that I want to roll out to my customers.
Yeah, I mean, good example. I mean, effectively, the way I see it, there's three ways how you can use feature flags for that. Like way number one is you have like AI generated code that makes a new feature. You wrap it behind a feature flag and you run an experiment on top of that to see is that feature useful? Does it cause any issues? Does it cause any degradation issues? And does it actually do something useful, right? The second thing is, it could also well help you is that maybe you have different AI models in the background running, for example, for a chatbot, right? You have an LMM running for chatbot, and you want to try out to see which chatbots work better to help customers solve a particular problem or to help them do something, right? So you could use a feature flag to run two different versions of the chatbot at the same time, understand the impact, and then understand which one you should actually release to your customers. And the third one is if you, for example, have an in-house built model or a model, you can use what's called dynamic configurations, which is basically a configuration, like the ability to configure feature flags on the fly without redeploying your entire code base to change the model weights of the model so you can like optimize it on the fly for like new lessons learned, new updates, because as you get more data to like train it on, and you can get new model weights to like really optimize the model in the long run to like help your customers actually solve their problems. I hope that answered your question. Please let me know if it doesn't. It
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah. I will. That's a great explanation for me. I just learned something right there. So thank you.
No worries. Cool. All right. So yeah, why would you care about a maturity audit? Right. I mean, the answer is pretty clear, right? You want to understand where you are right now. You want to kind of understand where your gaps are, where your opportunities are within terms of like processes or governance or data quality or tooling that might hold you back from a feature management experimentation point of view. You want to ideally also like benchmark yourself. Am I advanced? Am I okay? Or am I maybe a bit crap at it? Right. And that's okay because every firm is in a different life cycle and a different journey from the adoption point of view. And it also helps you kind of prioritize where should I actually focus on with improving things, you know? Am I really bad at the basics, but really good at some advanced stuff? But where do I need to now figure out where I should start? Right? So this is basically in a nutshell why you should do a maturity audit, right? So as we go now into the start of Tomate's main topic, I just want to make sure that it becomes clear. We're going to ask you a couple of questions. So please go into Zoom and going to ask them and like answer those there. If you, at any point of time you say, or you want to know, or have even a more deep dive maturity assessment at one point, please feel reach out to me and I'm happy to do it with you in a one-on-one session as well. So that's my offer to you as well. But let's get cracking. Cool. Before going into the individual sections, I want to actually explain the individual sections. So we effectively see that there is six major areas of maturing a feature flagging experimentation program. The first one is all about how do you control your releases? How do you decouple your releases effectively? How do you decouple your releases from deployments so you don't have to re-trigger your deployment all the time, which is expensive, takes time, might be very painful if you don't have a really good CI and CD solution, and it helps you to move faster and reliable, right? For example, some of our customers that we had, for example, like a large international fast food companies, we have really helped them quickly decouple their releases so they could quickly iterate and control what should be shown on their fast food ordering kiosks in a reliable way. And that really helped them get a massive return on investments on all the different types of experiments that they were able to run because of this. The next thing is obviously enhanced control. And with enhanced control, we effectively mean how do you now control your releases in such a way that it doesn't break your environments? E.g., who should get it? Who should you target it to? How do you control access to the actual tool itself, and so on. Then we're going to talk about normally measure impact, right? So decoupling and control, enhanced control is just basically an if-then statement, so to speak, about the feature itself. But that's just effectively a commodity value, right? This is just a feature, a capability that allows you to do things. But now you want to also then obviously ideally measure the impact on things, either through like release monitoring or sometimes we call it also impact detection, things to make sure that when you release something new, it doesn't break. And then also measuring the long-term impact of it through an experiment. And then how do you then scale these operations in a reliable way? Through periodically hygiene of like cleaning up your feature flags, making sure that they're actually done in the correct and governed way. And then also, how do you apply proper governance at scale for large scale organizations where you might not even have, where you might not have 500 flags, but maybe 5,000 flags or 10,000 flags, which we have seen with some of our larger enterprise clients. Cool. Which brings us to our first questions and our first, hopefully, a little bit more interactive things and not me just talking. Um, how would you currently, guys, rank your current ability to couple your releases from your deployments? So you should see in a second a little poll popping up in Zoom. So I would really appreciate it if you start voting on this. And we're going to vote effectively twice, right? We're going to vote now. Then we're going to go into the deep dive things, and then we're going to vote again on the same topic to see if we maybe have like slightly changed your view on things of how you're doing things.
Yep. So the categories here are non-existent, basic, good, advanced, or excellent. And I see the answers coming in. So we'll give this just about 10 more seconds for people to complete, and we'll see how we do. We're going to do these rapid fire because we're already about halfway through. We need to keep things moving. So I'll give you 5 more seconds. Here you go. Make sure you type in your answers. Click the buttons. And we're going to end it. And
Perfect.
let's take a look at the results.
Okay, so non-existent, basics, and good. All right, good. Let's see if we can bring this down even further. No question. Now, hopefully, like some of you will actually realize, hey, maybe I'm not that bad, and I can give myself a bit more grace, good grade on this.
Right. All right.
All right, let's go on. Cool, let me just go through. Okay, so when we talk about decoupling releases, right, effectively we're talking about de-risking and accelerating your current release cycle. That normally starts first with you need to have some sort of capability to do so. There's many different tools out there for like various different stages in the life cycle with an organization, right? Some organizations start with a homegrown tool because one engineer has had time to actually build something, build some very simple flagging, put it in place, and then at one point it might like get too expensive to maintain or to build or to update, and it slightly falls over. I've worked in many companies before where we build internally homegrown solutions, but then realize, it's actually not worth building in the long run, or it actually was a really good tool, but it was too expensive to maintain, right? Then what we see with a lot of people as well is like they go on full with a vendor, right? I mean, Harness is a vendor, there's other vendors out there, and it's all just how to trying to figure out how do you think you have the right capabilities with your vendor for your right problem and the right things you solve for, right? Do you have the proper tooling available to like really understand to solve your problems and your needs that you have with an organization, right? And the second thing is like, and the third thing is there are also open source tooling for the release management out there. And some of these toolings are like great to get you going. But similar to like a homegrowing tool, they tend to be like only for sometimes specific use cases, doesn't go really beyond thing and really fall over when you reach that really like good want to have proper management and scalability in mind and control and governance. Then normally what you also want to think about as well when you think about decoupling your releases, what type of feature flags do I actually want to have within my org, right? Do I want to have release flags, effectively like canary flags? They want to do canary deployments, canary releases. Do I just want to have kill switches, like just simple on-off switches? When something goes wrong, I just want to get rid of it. Do I want to have permission flags? And permission flags is basically a way of personalizing things and saying like I only want to give German customers access to that flavor of feature flag. I want to only give UK customers only that flag of feature flags. Then you have maybe operational flags, which basically could be comprised of multiple feature flags underneath to really understand that will live in your code base kind of like forever because they're just there as a last way resort that if lots of your underlying services die, that you could maybe turn off an entire user flow, an entire service and pivot and change it to another endpoint so that your app and your application doesn't fall over, right? And then lastly, experimentation flags. They tend to be more short-lived because obviously you want to iterate and quickly see what works or what doesn't work. Then the question is also like, how do you have them now with your either your open source, your vendor, your homegrown tool? Do you now actually have now the ability to do very specific releases to individual users for like your different production environments in QA and pre-prod and your production environments for like QA or like other purposes, right?
Hope you're enjoying this video, but did you know Lead Dev has lots more to offer?
So webinar, podcasts, I even like articles, conferences, events, and most importantly, community.
And even thinking about like process, tech, and people, which is how Lead Dev website is laid out, I really think this is the #1 learning platform for me as an engineering manager.
Don't forget to check out leaddev.com.
And secondly, do you have some sort of ability within your tool to actually do a proper user segmentation management for progressive rollouts, right? Where I said, for example, maybe you want to exclude everyone in London, but you want to release that new feature to everyone in the rest of the country. Or maybe you want to exclude your Japanese customers who are basketball fans from your Japanese customers who are sumo fans, right? So it's all about that granular control and user segmentation to then build up different flavors and different versions of your applications for your use cases. For B2B businesses, what we see a lot as well is that they're like basically using these systems to also control different industries. You know, this should go to all our financial organizations. This feature should go out to our insurance companies and so on. So it's a great way of like almost creating a really reliable and controllable like release plan for those particular use cases. All right. So is there any questions around this one? And if not, let's start the poll again and see how would you rank yourself now after having seen all these things with this particular thing?
Yeah. So there no questions have come in, but instead of doing the after poll, I think we're going to let people evaluate that on their own just for the sake of time.
Understood.
And yeah, so think about your initial response, and then maybe you would rate yourself a little better or a little worse, but you can be the determination of that. So I think we're going to keep moving on to the next section.
Okay, cool. All right, then let's go to the next question. When we talk about enhanced control, we know it's all about how you control now the individual like access to these features or these feature flags to like really put more control about what should get released, how should it get released, and who has access to these controls. How would you rank your current ability then to control your releases overall?
All right, so I've just put the poll up. Now's your time to tab back to Zoom if you've just been listening, as a lot of people do as we go through this. Now you can go back to Zoom and start ranking how you would rank your current ability to control your release from non-existent all the way up through excellent, or maybe you don't know. Maybe you're looking for an answer on the best way to do that or what that might look like. We'll just give you about 5 more seconds to go ahead and put in an answer. I see them coming in now, and then we'll show you the results. Go ahead and click if you haven't yet. And I'm going to end the poll now. And we'll share the results.
Awesome. Cool. I see a core basics and good. All right, that's a good baseline already.
Well, 33% were basic and about 67% ranked themselves as good. So no advanced or excellent in the group today.
Understood. All right, cool. I mean, as the title says, control equals less risk. One of the ways of getting more control is obviously having some sort of like mechanism for your trunk, like basically approaching it via a trunk-based development approach. Right? So it's basically, you all know GitHub, Git flows, and so on. if you have a proper feature flagging tool that allows you to deploy things in multiple environments with multiple configurations, multiple variants, you start to see that there's actually almost different branches along the development cycle, right? So if you now have a proper ability to control these, change all these things in this environment, you start to like develop them really in parallel. And because it's all through a centralized tool, now you suddenly have the ability to merge them in a reliable and less fuzzy way to see what works and what doesn't work. You also obviously have some sort of like dependency management in there, because if you like have a feature flag first development approach where you say every new feature needs to be behind the feature flag, and you use all these kinds of different operational flags and PIU flags and kill switch, you can chain them together and make logical flows to include the control of like what a user should see along the line. Also, like what I mentioned earlier, when the question actually came about AI, one of the things like a lot of feature flagging tools have, including ours, is like what's called dynamic configurations or like feature configurations, like basically allowing to like control the feature through a config file, a JSON file, or any other sort of like YAML file, and render and show different versions or different API endpoints or different model weights to really understand and change the different flavors of the feature and manage those through some sort of like management system. And when you make those management changes, how do you then properly propagate them through to you as a customer, either through a pull, push, or frequent update cycle to really ensure that the actual new experience actually lands with your customers. And then the last bit, how do you now actually then also integrate with your content management system to ensure that you actually are properly integrated and that the actual UX experience and user journeys actually align with the content that you're displaying, right? And that's how you can then use, for example, dynamic configs to figuring out and aligning, like basically through variabilizing different text variables with different features and make them dependent on each other to really ensure that what you show to the customer from a content perspective is actually truly aligned with the experience that they see within the UI. Right. So this is where we then talk effectively about enhancing control, like giving you from a developer point of view, from a configuration point of view, and from a content user point of view, that different kind of like control abilities and how it should be thought about in that instance. Cool. Are there any questions around this? Because otherwise we just go to the next section.
Yeah, one quick question on the content management and resilience. Yeah. What are the negative implications, or what have you seen in your experience, I guess, when that is not aligned? What happens to the end user at that point?
It can create some really bizarre experiences. For example, like you have a feature flag about a new particular feature, and you are rolling out this maybe just only to 20% of your user base. Because of like limitations about scalability, or maybe management is not like happy about like how quickly you should like raise the traffic for it. But then, for example, maybe there was a misalignment with marketing, and marketing already thought that we can advertise this feature as much as possible already. So now marketing is like putting a content banner on the homepage that says like, find this new feature right now. But only 20% of people actually have access to the feature and they can't find it. Suddenly you have people calling customer support, like, where's my feature? I can't see it. Or executives even saying is like, because maybe they're in the 80% who don't get the feature, like, why is this advertised where I can't see it? Right. So it creates scenarios where things might be advertised, things might be highlighted, but people actually can't get into it. And it creates this really like awkward user journeys and potential like social media fallouts where things go wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We've all seen examples of that over the years, especially
Indeed.
lately. So for sure. Okay, great.
Cool. All right. Next question then, in terms of all about governance. How do you think about how good your governance is from a operating point of view, from a process documentation point of view, from approval point of view, and so on? So how would you rank your current governance in regards to feature flags and experimentation?
Great. So the poll should be up now. Go ahead and get your mouse, touchpads, fingers ready, and click those buttons, and we'll see how people rank themselves in terms of governance, and then we'll go in and have a little discussion. So the poll's up now, and I'm going to end it in just a few seconds. Everybody get their clicks in. Here we go. Ending poll. I'm going to end it now. Okay, let's take a look at the results.
All right.
Looks
Okay.
like most people are somewhat in the beginning to good stages, kind of a broad spectrum there.
Understood. Good to know. All right. Yeah. I mean, governance is a big topic for a bank, and I can probably talk for ages about governance, especially in like highly regulated environments. And obviously, like different industries have different government regulatory and governance requirements. But some things are just good practice, regardless if you're working for a big bank or an e-commerce platform or like a marketing agency or other organizations that might have like not less regulatory constraints of what you can do. All right. So when I talk about governance, I think the first thing I want to really flag is governance is not just a tick box of saying is what processes do I need to follow? Do I have raised a ticket and so on? It's also a mindset about how will you want to operate within your organization. And the first thing I always want to argue for is you need to build with iteration in mind. If you don't build feature flags, if you don't build experiments, if you don't features with like iterations in mind that you want to constantly iterate on them, change them, experiment on them, you're just going to waste a lot of time, effort, and building things because you always have to go back to the actual code to change things, right? The next thing is how do you actually then now orchestrate everything and integrate your feature flagging and experimentation tool into your existing product or ticket management system, right? Do you have a Jira integration? Can you like actually link it to your ServiceNow desk? Can you like integrate it with like certain approval flow systems that you might have for ServiceNow, right? Because ideally, you don't want to move from one tool to the other tool to the other tool because that just adds toil and is annoying, and you might not get like maybe it's an asynchronous process. But if you have like a tool that really allows you to like have it in one flow and you wait for the right approvals until they're given and then it automatically executes, that's kind of like the ideal scenario you want to be in. The next thing is like, how do you think about your feature management experimentation operating model, right? Is it a top-down and post things by leadership says we everything needs to be on a feature flag, we want to experiment? Is it a bottom-up approach where like individual teams do their own things, but therefore maybe they have like individual tools that they acquired over the years? Or is there maybe like a centralized team that orchestrates the tooling and then gives everyone in the organization access to the tools and manage the access? Because every of these like approaches has its pros and cons about really driving a feature first and feature and experimentation like maturity within an organization in the long run. The next thing is like if you're in a more heavily regulated industry, one thing is incredibly important is do you have change logs, audit trails to really show who changed what at what point of time with what flavor of things? Because if something goes wrong, you need to show this to the regulators to say, oh, we just changed something here and it, I don't know, broke our payment cycle, it broke our credit card sign up user flow, right? So you need to be able to show this to the actual regulator that you have broken things when you've broken things, how it was broken, and how you remediated those things in a quick and reliable way. And the last thing is, how do you actually manage access and roles within your feature flagging experimentation tool that not just say any data scientist or any junior can go to like one of those major operational flags, can change something and suddenly turns off an entire flag for an entire country. And believe me, I did in the past, one of my previous firms where I went to a feature flag for the Italian market and turned something, one of our key features off by accident because I had access to the entire tool and I couldn't control exactly when we couldn't exactly control who has access to what functionality of like who can turn off in what certain places, right? So understanding like who can do what, when they should do it, how they should do it, what approvals are needed is really, really critical to making sure that you really de-risk your releases from a just human error point of view, right? We're all humans, we all make mistakes. So the only thing we can do is building systems that make it hard for making mistakes in the first place. Cool. Are there any questions on it? Otherwise, if not, we go straight to the next question then.
There's no real questions, but there I just love how you when you were explaining the audit trails, how you stopped yourself from saying if you have a problem, right? To say when you have a problem. Because we
Yes.
all know, we've all been in this long enough to know that problems are going to happen, regardless of whether you want them to or not. So I just thought I was chuckling to myself as you made that on the fly change.
You're
No pun
always human,
intended
right?
with on the fly changes. We all make those too. Probably not a good idea.
Indeed.
So yeah, I think we can move on.
Cool. All right, which brings us to hygiene. Just a quick one. Obviously, hygiene is important personally and for feature flags. So how often do you clean up your feature flags if you use them, right? Because as I said before, if you don't clean up them regularly, it can introduce tech debt and other things in the long run.
Great. So I've got the poll up now. If you're listening, go ahead and flip over to Zoom and answer the poll question. How often do you clean up your feature flags? Hopefully it's often and regularly and automated
Cool.
maybe. Yeah, we'll see.
Nice.
So the answers are coming in. I'm going to go ahead and close out this poll in about 5 seconds. So now's your last chance to chime in. And ending the poll now. All right, let's take a look at the results.
All right. Good mix between ad hoc and often.
Yeah,
That's good. We have no never, which is wonderful to hear.
yeah.
And most of the time, good, very good. That's a good
I think
outcome.
that's fairly typical, at least
Yeah,
in my experience. Yeah.
I agree. I agree.
So
Awesome.
about 60% ad hoc, about 30% say often. Yep.
Great. Cool. All right, let's go into the hygiene section then. So that one is a relatively short one because hygiene ideally should be a short process. It shouldn't be like a drawn out process in the long run as well. But right, everyone needs to clean up their house from time to time. We don't want to live in a messy house. So how do you basically it now becomes it's like almost hygiene is almost an extension of governance, but we have it as a separate category because it comes with its own challenges at times. Because like it's like how do you identify what types of flags should live for how long? Which is then all about related to the life cycle management, right? So if you think about the things that I mentioned earlier, that there's different types of feature flags, different type of experimentation flags, they all have the use cases. And there unfortunately isn't really like an easy answer of what is the best lifecycle management for your organization. But the thing is, you need to have some sort of plan of how you want to think about it and how you want to share and like with this an organization of like when you should retire a flag. Should you retire a flag after 90 days, 100 days, 2 years, 3 years? And how you want to classify those flags within your code base to ensure that BIU flags or operational flags don't get retired by accident, because that obviously could have like major downstream impacts when you actually need to turn them off, right? So you almost need to think about like, how do you do a consistent audit, or do you have a tool available that really tells you where the status or where a feature flag is in their respective life cycle at the moment? And obviously that brings us to the other point that I raised is you need to have some sort of like defined or enforced process for managing feature flags and releases and experiments on a gradual basis. Lots of our customers either do it for like a monthly review sessions or a quarterly review session. Some customers say, I want to do it only on an annual basis, right? So it really depends on like again, on your organizations, on your level of maturity, of how often you want to do it. But ideally, you can start very simple, but just having a simple Confluence page somewhere to dictate, yeah, we should do this, or we have like a regular catch up. But it's better to do it at one point rather than waiting too long, because the more feature flags you have that you don't know how they're working with each other, how they may be intrinsically linked to each other, the more hard it is to get released to clean those things up in the long run. Cool. Let's move on, unless there are any questions, to the next section, which is all about impact detection.
Yep. There was no questions on this section.
Cool. Impact detection, as I said before, is all about release monitoring, right? How do I ensure that when I start to release something, I don't actually that I find an issue quickly and reliable, and I know that I can trace back that to something that I changed somewhere. So
Right.
how long currently do you think does it take you to find an issue when you release something?
Yep. So the poll is live. Go ahead and click on the buttons to register your answers for how long it takes you to find an issue after a release. This one is critically important, actually. I mean, this has been true for a long time, but I mean, this is one of the things that really companies want to improve at as they are finding these issues, or not finding them, as the case may be, right? You want to find these things quickly and get them addressed quickly, hopefully easily by a support team or something. So yeah, people are voting now, and I'm going to end the poll in 5 seconds. Ending now. All right, poll is ended. Let's go ahead and take a look at the results.
Okay. So we
This
have
is pretty good.
pretty good. Pretty good.
We've got a few people saying a couple of days, and that ranges all the way up to as quick as 4 minutes. I think that's 4 minutes is actually really good.
Yeah, that is really good. And I'm very happy that we don't have a what issues answer.
Great, great.
Okie dokie. Right. So when we talk about or thinking about impact detection, right? As Aaron beautifully summarized, speed and traceability of an issue is really of the utmost importance, right? Because the amount of times, especially these days, where things get released quickly and maybe the QI didn't work as well, or maybe someone was vibe coding way too hard and they introduced a lot of and deployed and released some sort of tool with a lot of security issues, or what maybe was not the most reliable build, you need to have some sort of like observability tool with alerting, right? To really say, I released something, did it hurt my release or not? Obviously, there's a range of different observability tools out there. But there's also like obviously like lots of integrations with observability for like different kinds of like feature flagging and experimentation solutions out there to really understand, can I trace back my change to an individual feature and a variant to see if it does a negative impact? And if so, please alert me automatically and ideally kill something the moment it goes bad, right? Because the worst thing that can happen is that something runs for multiple days or multiple weeks without anyone actually actioning on it, right? Because alerting is one thing, but automatically killing something, that is where you can really de-risk your release profile or your releases in the long run, right? So, and to really highlight the fact is like you need to have some sort of ability to trace back the issue to a specific feature and change within your release cycle to really help you speed up as well to find the root cause, right? Because there's a lot of like observability tools out there, for example, like Grafana, right? That just shows you they're out of like 1,000 users, for 1% of my users, I see a degradation in performance, right? But these observational observabilities don't tell you which feature it is, which variant it is, right? But if you have a feature management experimentation tool available to you that can integrate with existing observability tool or have observability, for example, baked in, it allows you to just really quick trace back and find those issues, go straight in, kill it, fix the bug, and release a new version of it in a matter of minutes, right? That basically means also is like you need some sort of like attribution engine to really attribute the metrics that you have and you care about to the actual change itself. You know, do I care about user impact? Do I care about performance metrics like latency and performance aggregation, load times? Do I care about plain revenue, right? And ideally, you have a tool that allows you to not only look at from a pure technical point of view, but also from a user-centric point of view. Has this change made a negative impact, yes or no, within the hours or weeks of the release in itself? In order to do so, you need some sort of like standardized and reusable metric format, you know, that everyone in the organization knows that this is the North Star metric that we don't want to harm. This is the guardrail metric of an organization that we don't want to negatively impact. Right. If you don't have that, then you need to start thinking about like, what are actually the metrics that I really don't want to negatively impact? And the amount of like potentially like customers and prospects, we talked about it earlier in the journey, who don't even can tell us necessarily like from a user point of view, what we shouldn't negatively impact is kind of like astonishing at times, because like in a lot of instances, they just think about, oh yeah, we don't want to negatively impact performance and all these like technical metrics. But sometimes they don't sometimes think is like they don't see the customer metric as well as the first thing to look at. But it's important to have both views, the customer and the technical impact at hand to really understand what works and doesn't work at scale. Cool. If there's no questions on this one, we're going to move to the last bit of today, which is the experimentation section.
This section, I've just got to say, this resonates so hard with me. Just everybody is measuring MTTD and MTTR, right? And what we're showing is going beyond all of that, right? You can take all four of these things and measure them, and not just have one MTTR metric, for example, or MTTD
100%.
metric. You can actually get a lot deeper into measuring the impact of these things. And so,
100%.
yeah, this is great. I love it. I love it. Hearing you go through these is so cool. So, okay, no further questions though. So let's move on to the last one.
Okay, cool. Last but not least, experiment or experimentation, right? Which is hopefully as the main takeaway of things, ideally at the end of your programs, you want to get to the point where you can actually run experiments on scale on all the feature flags that you have with an organization to really show the value of it. Because as I said, the worst case that you can have within a product organization is that you spend 6 months, 12 months building something, and then you don't measure what it actually does. You want to have a process and framework in place that allows you to actually measure the impact, iterate on it, and really find that global or local maximum in terms of user experience, ad hoc metrics or like performance metrics for your organization.
Yep. So I think everyone's got the drill now because I already see the answers
Oh, that
coming
was
in.
quick. Lovely.
Yeah. People know what to do. They're clicking away. So yep, show value. Again, we've gone from, you never do it to you do it most of the time. So I'm going to end the poll here in about 5 seconds. Ending the poll now. Great. Thanks for those quick responses, everybody. And let's take a look at the results. Yeah, so about 67% said ad hoc or by request.
Very good.
And then we had about 33% that said often.
Very good. I'm very happy that no one says never. That makes me very happy because experimentation is very close to my heart. That's great. That makes me very happy. Cool.
Okay.
All right. So what are some of the things you should consider when running a big experimentation program, right? The first thing is like how much is actually measured on launch? And that's a bit of a weird one. And basically what I mean with is like if you say you do 100 releases a month, right? Of these 100 releases a month, how many of them are actually measured when they're released? And that could mean two things, right? How many of them are just monitored from a technical point of view, which is if you only do that, that's already a good beginning, right? But how many of them are really try to understand what the root cause is from changes in user behavior, change in revenue, and change of all these different things, right? So if you don't know even that thing at the beginning, I would try to understand why are you not measuring within the organization? Is it because you don't have the right technical capabilities? Do you not have the right feature flagging tool in place? Or do you not have like a champion or like a lack of knowledge within the organization to really understand that the value that experimentation can bring to the product organization itself? The next thing I would ask and think about is, do you actually got all the data readily available to help you with decision making, right? Because effectively experimentation is more of a methodology to help you make better decisions. But what do you need to make better decisions? You need data to make those decisions, right? Do you have event tracking in place? Do you have backend metrics in place to really describe how a user has moved through your application? What was the downstream impact on like churn metrics, lifecycle metrics, customer support query metrics that really would identify the health of your customer base? And if you don't have that, that will hamper and help, and you will struggle with like building up an experimentation program at scale. Then the thing is, when you do make those decisions and you have some data available, is this data only available, through like UX research and qualitative? To like say, yeah, we've done some piece of research, users say this and this. How much external validity does it have? Is it just purely data driven? And that's a bit weird bit one, because like when you look at just purely graphs and do like a pre-post analysis, I've just released something and then see what the impact is. That is obviously useful and together with UX research. provides some flavor of understanding what has happened, but it doesn't really properly tell you exactly what has happened, because you can only do that for a proper like experiment where you can isolate the change of this worked because we changed X, Y, and Z, and only X, Y, and Z, right? So for a proper experiment, you can really attribute the change in itself to the experience. Then do you have an analysis framework to enable decision making? Do you have a statistical engine? Do you have a decision science team, a data team, or like a tool available to you for actually using and gathering all this data, crunch the numbers and tells you that this experiment, this experience worked better than the other one, right? And the last thing, then, like one of the last things, is that do you actually, if you're running a lot of experiments at scale, do you have some sort of mechanism to really understand which experiments are running in which area, where they might be overlapping, might they maybe have interactions affect with each other that like might bias the results of my experiments itself? And lastly, when you run a lot of experiments, do you store them somewhere in a conference page in one of your tooling to create some sort of institutional memory? Because if you don't build up institutional memory, you end up just maybe replicating every single thing that you're doing every 2 years, because maybe you have a new product managers, new developers. So you lose all the good work that your organization maybe has tried out many moons ago and it didn't work. So in the long run, if you have a tool like this and like an institution memory, it helps you figuring out what works for your customers, what doesn't work for your customers, and you don't necessarily waste resources of ideas that you already dismissed early on in your product development cycle. Cool. So this is effectively why I want to stop today. And I hope this was interesting to you. And obviously my offer stands if you want to have a more of an in-depth maturity assessment for your individual company, please reach out to myself or to Harness as a whole. We can probably set something up. And I'm going to hand over to Aaron now for the outro of today's session.
Yeah, there was one question that came
Oh,
in on that
fire away.
experimentation. So I'm going to paraphrase this because it's rather long. But basically, what they're asking is they have a data management team and a data warehouse that they would love to be able to run more experiments, but the data management team doesn't allow them basically to interact because of regulatory requirements, right, with the data that's in the data warehouse online. So is there a way to run experiments on a data warehouse without doing some sort of ETL, time-consuming ETL process?
Yes. I mean, there's different flavors of experimentation analysis, right? So for example, we at Harness have like two different ways. Like one is you alluded to is like what's called this data warehouse native, or warehouse native solutions, where you basically have you deploy a warehouse SDK in your individual warehouse, say Snowflake, you build up your own tables, you build up your ETL pipelines, and then there's a stats engine that does all the number crunching, right? Which is good because obviously you can get like both backend and front end metrics to like get the whole picture of things. But you're right, is like if you struggle with data access rights, or you struggle with having a dedicated data engineering team to build up these ETL pipelines in a good and reliable way, it's a bit prohibitive. So we have therefore also like another thing, what's called cloud experimentation, which basically means is we don't need to like run things on your warehouse. You send your events to us and we process them for them, and you decide what you want to send to us. And then we just crunch the number on the things you send to us, and then display this through the UI and the experimentation analysis module to see what has happened and what hasn't happened, right? So in that way, you have more control of what should get surfaced in certain instances. Both paradigms can be used in highly regulated environments. It just depends of like, then again, also with like your local laws about what you want to send, how you want to send it, and so on. Happy to like look at your particular use case in more detail, because when it's financial data or some more sensitive things, it can get a bit tricky of like what you can send, what you cannot send.
Right. Cool. All
Cool.
right. Well, that's the last question. Let's talk about, it's always great to hear about what other people in your situation are doing and where they are on the maturity scale, if you will. And so I've got a couple of resources for you. The first one is on demand. It's available now. And we basically sat down with McDonald's, JP Morgan Chase, and talked to them about scaling, experimentation. This just happened a few weeks ago. And so I would definitely, if you can, take a listen to this or watch it, I guess. And the links are actually available to you in the resources tab. You can actually go click on those links, and this is on demand. I think you still have to put in your information. Maybe if you're already logged in, you don't have to. But I highly, highly recommend going and watching that one, because it's amazing to see what some of these companies can do that are more on the mature end of the scale, I would say, and it might really open your eyes to what's possible. And then the other one, as we record this today, is an upcoming webinar, but it'll be available on demand as well. And that's talking about how engineering leaders are using feature flags to de-risk replatforming and migration. That should be really interesting, actually, because it's a different use case than we've been talking about today. And a lot of people may not know that you can use feature flags to help you as part of your migration process. So that'll be coming up in the new year as we record this today. Yeah, so the last thing is, if there are any final questions, of course, on the last slide, go ahead and ask them now. And I think we have a QR code on the next slide, Alex, that will also allow you to sign up for a demo. So we didn't put a whole lot of product specific information in here, because we wanted this to be generic and useful for anybody that watches this. But of course, we have our own product, and we would love to show you how this actually works, give you examples of what this would actually look like in the product. And so you can actually scan that QR code. This is your chance and to get that, or just do a Google search. Honestly, it's very easy, but we would love to give you a demo or set up some time with Alex to come in and walk your whole team through the maturity model, and maybe give you a way to start measuring where you're at and where you could go. And yeah, maybe if you're the one that brings in Alex, maybe at the end of the year, there might be, in your evaluation, there might be a little perk in there for you, because you're going to be seen as the hero here, because you've improved the way that you use feature flags and experimentation for your whole organization. At least that's the way I would approach it. So it doesn't look like there's any questions. So I think we're just going to end it here. And I just want to say, Alex, thank you for sharing your experience with us today. I love having someone who has experience in the field like you do to come in and actually guide us all through what it means to have a mature practice around something like feature flags and experimentation. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was great. Hopefully,
Yeah.
see you soon, guys.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.